welcome to today's webinar, which is the fourth GINTL and JoLii webinar. Today's topic is on Sino-Finnish higher education cooperation, opportunities and challenges. And for those, you have checked the program, so you may expect Oli Bega is moderating the session. But because the illness of Oli Bega, so I will take on his role. So today I will be the moderator. Welcome everybody on board, and also thank you for the 3 panelists. So today we are going to have 2 speakers and 1 commentator. So before we formally start today's webinar, I will announce the protocols or the procedures for the webinar. So this webinar is jointly organized by GINTL and the Sino-Finnish Education Research Centre JoLii. So this is the 4th webinar of education and the society. So before we start, let me take you through our webinar protocols. Please remember this webinar is being recorded, and the parts of the webinar that were allowed to be shared by our speakers will be available on the websites of GINTL Network and the Sino-Finnish Education Research Centre. The presentation slides will also be available there. So during the webinar, please keep yourself muted unless you are asked to speak or ask a question at the Q&A part. You can keep your video on if you wish. We recommend you to use the speaker view, so you can select in the top right corner of your Zoom screen so you can clearly see who is speaking. To ask a question, please use chat function to indicate your question or comments, and then the moderator, so that's me, will invite you to raise your question in the Q&A session. And so you can either read the question to the speakers or I can read the question for you. So when you are reading the question, please turn on your mic and the camera, state your name and which institution you are from. So this is the protocol, and now let's start today's webinar. First, I invite the speaker, Dr. Jing Meiying from National Academy of Education Administration. So Dr. Jing is the Deputy Director for International Cooperation at the National Academy of Education Administration, China. Dr. Jing got her PhD degree in Management Science from Beijing University. She is also visiting researcher at the University of Sydney and the Temple University. Her research interests focuses on organizational change and educational leadership development. She was also a key member of a national education project titled Transformation of Chinese Local Universities. She has also been engaged in several EU-China or Finland-China higher education cooperation program, including EU Erasmus Plus project called Governance and Academic Leadership of Chinese and European Universities in the context of innovation and internationalization. So Dr. Jing, so now floor is yours. So please share your slides and give your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tsai. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, can you see the slides?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon and good evening, Mariana, Dr. Tsai, David Liu, and other dear colleagues from China and Finland, other country. I thank Dr. Tsai and GINTL-JoLii for this opportunity. It's my pleasure to participate at this webinar. And I think the topic today is very significant and meaningful. My presentation will include 3 parts. The first part, I would like to give a brief description about higher education cooperation in China and Finland in terms of the national policies level, scholar research level, and institutional practice level. At the second, I would like to analyze the challenge and opportunities of the cooperation between higher education institutions in Finland and China at 2 levels, policy level and practice level. And the third part, based on the analysis above, I would like to, based on the practice of our academy, National Academy of Education Administration's perspective, give some solution, tackle the challenges. Okay. As we know, China and Finland has a very long history of friendship. And just as Chinese President Xi has stated, the 2 countries has endured friendship. And in terms of higher education cooperation, 2 countries also share very good memories, the stories, especially in the past 8 to 10 years. There are some, very good practice occurred initiated in the higher education cooperation in 2 countries. At the national policy level, in the past 2 years, there are 2 very important policies. The first one is the China-Finland higher education cooperation framework. And under this framework, there are a lot of projects initiated. And I highlighted 3 of them. The first is the China-Finland Learning Garden, which was set in 2015. And for example, the JoLii, today one of the hosts, is also set up under this framework. And JoLii, of course, is mainly concentrated on students' mobility and joint research. The other project is initiated in 2015. It's about SIMO project, and it was funded by the Finnish Ministry of Education, mainly focused on the training and workshop for international office executives in both countries. The third one is targeting the universal applied sciences to promote the cooperation and dialogue between rectors of university applied science in 2 countries. And the latest one policy is the one initiated from last year, the May last year. It's the first China-Finland education policy dialogue, which emphasized 2 countries will start or enhance cooperation in student exchange, higher education, vocational education, and language teaching in schools. Okay, all the projects just we mentioned actually is included in the joint action plan between China and Finland. And you can see here, the first one here is about the JoLii cooperation. And the one here, the last one is about University Applied Science Directors Dialogue. And actually, so we at National Academy of Education Administration take part in this projects. At second, from the scholar research level, I have investigated how the scholars consider or concerned about China-Finland higher education cooperation. And, there are 2 very famous Chinese language academic resources. One is CNKI, the other is by those scholars. And from the resources, we can see the numbers of articles targeting the research on the China-Finland higher education cooperation is not many. There are only a few of them. The topics the concern is about clean technology, joint degree, online courses at smart city, nursing, teacher training, and pedagogy. We can see all these topics are actually strength of Finnish universities, especially Finnish University of Applied Sciences. And in terms of Finland, for the articles concerned about Finland higher education, that is for best practice of Finnish universities or University of Applied Sciences. The topics mainly concerned with internationalization, international governance, higher education governance, apprenticeship training, and higher education evaluation or entrepreneurship education, etc. All these topics, actually, from our survey, we know it's the hot topics for cooperation between the two countries as well. And third, I would like to investigate how the institution, at the institutional practice, how is the cooperation between two countries. The table here shows just only some of the few of them for the research university level and University of Applied Science level, what kind of cooperation they have and what content and what activities. And from this table, we can see in the research university level, the main type of the cooperation is dual program or joint research centers and some other relevant centers. And for the University of Applied Sciences level, they mainly concerned with students and staff exchange, and some of them start to work on the joint degree. And second, from this map, I also investigate the regions of Finnish partners in China. We can see most of the cooperation or the partners located in eastern part of China or in big cities. But for those in western part of China or mid part of China, there are very few cooperations. In terms of type of cooperation, as I described before in table, is student exchange, business scholar, a dual degree. The longest is interesting. We also investigated the longest, the time of the cooperation, the history. The longest one is 26 years. I started from the University of Applied Sciences, and I also listed the field of cooperation here. Also, this is mainly concerned about University of Applied Sciences cooperation in China. And from the analysis of the description above, we can see there are still very good, strong opportunities for university higher education institutions in two countries to cooperate. At the policy level, the two countries have exerted strong, will to work together. For example, in Finnish part, and the EU policy, China has been set as a priority countries in higher education cooperation. And in they see China higher education development is a good opportunity for the cooperation, especially in vocational education. China has conducted the national vocational education reform, which was seen as a big opportunity for cooperation of European countries and Finnish universities as well. And at the institutional level, there was strong willing from both countries. The universities or the University of Applied Sciences in Finland has a strong will to cooperate with the Chinese partners. They want to find new right partners to work on various fields of cooperation. And also in the past several years, a lot of key players has occurred or emerged. For example, the scholars and the governmental representatives, and also in China, it's very obviously Chinese provincial, some Chinese provincial government has expressed their will to work with some Finland universities and some European universities as well. So, but there are still, from our survey, we know there are still very big challenges or problems occurred between the cooperation. At two levels. First, at the national level, there is some, you can see I describe a metaphor, use a metaphor to describe the cooperation between higher education cooperation in two countries. You can see the Finnish system of higher education and Chinese higher education system has a very big contrast in terms of scale. So because of this, their intentions also contrast as well. And in national policy level, there are some policies, but the policy is not that solid enough. There is no funding followed the policy and no tangible mechanism to support the cooperation. At the institutional level, from our interview, and we know that, especially from the Finnish part, the university presidents or leaders, they express their willingness to work with Chinese partners. And they say small country needs big friends. And they see China's higher education development, economic development as a great opportunity. They want to work with Chinese partners, but they express their lack of understanding and lack of the channel of writing information is very limited. And especially for the universal applied sciences in Finland, they say they are hard. It is very hard for them to find the right partners because China has a very large or huge higher education system, and a lot of the system is complex, and they find it's very difficult for them to identify right partners. And there are also some cultural barriers occurred as well. And the other problems is they know from China's practice, they know what needed in China. That means especially in terms of vocational education or the transformation of a local university into university applied sciences. Such universities are actually the group who needs the cooperation or assistance from Finnish part or Finnish partners, but it's very hard for them to get seen or get known in China because compared with other Western universities in vocational areas in German and Switzerland or Australia and Canada, Finland seems not that visible in China higher education system field. So what the Finnish university need to do, or the university applied science needed to do, is to get visible in China. And also from our survey and the interview, we know that because Finnish university or university applied science have a very comparatively small scale, they don't want so many Chinese students. The student number is not their priority target. They want to exert value to show they are valuable in the development of Chinese higher education. So that's, but they have no right way or to realize to find solutions to it. So from my point of view and from our academy, National Academy of Education Administration perspective, I would like to address this solution. I would like to address these challenges, the problems. And before that, I will give a very brief introduction about our academy. It was founded in 1955. It's comparatively with other universities in China, it's an old one. And we are part of Ministry of Education, Chinese Ministry of Education. And the present, the Ministry of Education concurrently hosts as the president of our academy. And we are specialized in education leadership. We're non-degree, and teachers capacity building. There are 3 tasks for us: it's leadership programs, leadership capacity building, and research, and policy consultation to policymakers. And the model for us, our academy is a hybrid one. We have face-to-face programs. Among that, the flagship programs is University Leaders program and Middle Managers program. For this program, we also have a spring semester and autumn semester. And for the university leaders, they will stay at our campus for 45 days of work. And for those middle managers, they will stay at our campus for 3 months to take in the program. And also we have some programs for educational officials from local government and for school principals. These programs are 2 weeks longer, and for primary education. I don't bother to introduce them more here. And for the methods of delivery, it include lectures, but the most important one is discussions and peer-to-peer learning from forums and workshops. And if the COVID-19, before the COVID-19, we also take the program participant to other cities for field studies, and which was very welcomed by all the, well received by all the participants. And apart from the face-to-face program, we have also e-learning programs. We have very huge scale of e-learning programs in China, especially in the past 3 years. Since 2019 for the COVID-19, this have played a very key role in promoting the training and leadership capacity building in China. At National Academy of Education Administration also has a mission to facilitate communication or bridge communication between Chinese university leaders and their international peers through roundtable dialogues, topical forums, and workshop blended programs. These are the programs we have done. We have conducted in the past years. We have inbound program, outbound programs. In terms of facilitating China-Finland higher education communication, in the past 10 years, we have worked with temporary university, targeting research university, bridging the dialogue and communication for leaders from research universities. For example, we sent a university group, a leadership group to Finland in 2016 and 2017. It's about the Chinese University Leaders Overseas Program. They stayed in Finland for 3 weeks, studying and exchanging with their peers. And it's a good way to enhance or facilitate the communication and the dialogue between the university leaders in 2 countries. And also, as I mentioned before, we attend as a key partners of the CIMO project. We conduct with GINTL-JoLii together to conduct blended training programs for international office executives. This is also a very good example for us to facilitate communication and dialogue between the middle managers in universities of both countries. There are some pictures here. This one is our vice president with Dr. Tsai, and our executive vice president visit or dialogue with the ambassador from Finland. And the second partner we have in Finland is Arinen. Arinen is the University of Applied Science Rectors Conference. And they are, for this platform, actually, we facilitate especially the dialogue of the University of Applied Science Rectors through roundtable discussions. And we also hold lectures in meeting request from the Finnish University of Applied Science Rectors. We held some Understanding China series, lecture series to them. And it was a very good one to give a support for the University of Applied Science Rectors in Finland to know more about China. And we also conduct joint research. And these are the pictures in the past years for the university presence dialogue and the roundtable we can see. And after each forum, we always have a dialogue between university rectors, university license rectors in two countries to discuss about cooperation opportunities. This is one of the forums the university welcomed a lot in the past. At a happy gathering picture, and I can see I record that Mariana visited us in 2019. That was our first time, but unfortunately at that time I didn't recognize her among so many university rectors. And today is my second time to meet her online. Okay, from the description and analysis above, we suggest to solve the challenges and problems of the higher education cooperation between two countries. Well, first, we would like to, or we needed to, enhance the communications in the right way. And we enhance the understanding, mutual understanding between different levels, different groups of university leaders, middle managers, or teachers as well. And from that, we can improve the cooperation between two countries. Of course, we have just renewed the MOU with Arena last week, and all these 4 parts actually included in the MOU as well. In realized our MOU and to enhance the communication or dialogue between university leaders and the rectors of university applied science in two countries, we needed to work with various players like GINTL-JoLii and the Finland Embassy in China. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jing, for sharing your experience, also the collaboration between China and Finland in higher education from the NEA's perspective. So I think this is a very good example, and also National Academy of Education Administration is playing a key role or supplementary role in the university collaboration, because university collaborations need both top-down and bottom-up initiatives, especially in the Chinese context. I think you have brought over 100 university leaders from China to join the Finnish training program. Also, facilitated many university level forums, dialogues. I think these are very important. I think we will come back, to your examples, your experience later in our question session. But now let's continue our presentation. So by the way, I think for those who joining us later, you might be curious why I'm here. Actually I'm replacing Olibega Malinen, and unfortunately, he's ill today. So he asked me to replace his role as a moderator. So I'm Yu Zhuocai from Temple University. And now we welcome our second speaker, Mariana Suurmunne. Mariana Suurmunne is the Counselor of Education and Science at the Finnish Embassy in Beijing, where she facilitates cooperation between Finnish and Chinese higher education institutions. Mariana holds a PhD degree in political science from the University of Alberta and has worked in various roles in higher education institutions in Finland and beyond. So Mariana, welcome to give your talk, and we will share your slides. So just indicate when you are going to change. Thank you. Floor is yours.
Yes. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, very nice to join you here tonight. Please, you can start the slides. It was very nice to see the pictures from the previous presentation from Naya. I remember the time in my early stay here in this position in Beijing. I arrived in 2018, later part, and then I had a little bit over 1 year of nice time of a lot of visitors and a lot of interaction between higher education institutions. And of course, unfortunately, with the pandemic now, we have not been able to have visitors, but cooperation has continued. There are some challenges. I will elaborate on some of those challenges, but at the same time, I think there are very many very good models for cooperation. So I think we are ready to move on to the next level. But please, let's go to the next slide. So what has changed and what may change again? If we say, I said in my title that winds of change perhaps in the cooperation. Of course, China has become a global political and economic superpower, and that has changed somewhat the equation, especially in research cooperation. There is the superpower competition with the US, and we know that there is a rivalry. Both superpowers are especially keen on achieving the leadership in critical technologies, and that can make actually academic cooperation a little bit complicated sometimes, even for small countries like Finland, because you have to, in some cases, decide which researchers you are cooperating with. Also, as China is rising and becoming increasingly important player in the international system, we see that China is a partner, a competitor in a healthy way, of course, and a systemic rival at the same time. And China will continue to shape the international system. And that is something that we have to take into consideration and learn more about China, understand China better, so we are able to be strong and equal partners in the future as well. So China's domestic development, of course, is different than it is in Finland. You have in China strong leaders, strong party, and of course, strength of economy is a question mark now in the aftermath of COVID. Ideological unity, similarly, is COVID time challenging this unity, but China has very strong national identity. And again, COVID policies may affect that sentiment, and that remains to be seen. But Finland and China have good relations, and that has really been the basis of all well-functioning cooperation. But at the same time, the world is changing. We have now war in Europe with Russia's attack on Ukraine. Finland is becoming a NATO member. So the powers and the equations are changing, and we may have to look into our positions differently. Of course, COVID pandemic has made all cooperation more difficult, but existing long-term partnerships have functioned very well, actually, and they have found really nice new ways to cooperate. Unfortunately, the post-COVID time that I think we already live in Finland and in Europe, elsewhere, in China, it is still a distant dream. So we don't know when travel is possible, when the partners can meet, when the new partnerships can be built. So sometimes I am concerned that maybe Finnish higher education institutions are looking elsewhere, so that China may be losing some of the relevance because of these reasons. Next slide, please. I have been doing China cooperation first in a higher education institute at Aalto University from 2010, and I think we are seeing maybe how the partnership mode, or how we view, how Finnish higher and European higher education institutions view China have changed to an extent. So we are seeing these kind of wave movements. So in some ways, I think the higher education cooperation was really discovered in early 2000, and that's when everybody wanted to work with China. Everything was full of opportunities. But then from late 2018 and so forth, I think there has been some concerns about the cooperation with China, and especially because of the issues that I just mentioned in my earlier slides. China is now a superpower. China has a different kind of political system. So how do we find ways to cooperate with China? Because we very much want to find ways to cooperate with China better. So a question mark is that when we are in a position that we can really build better and more aware partnerships with China, again, on equal basis that work for both sides, on win-win basis, as we often say as well. Next slide, please. So I was asked to talk a little bit about the document that the Finnish Ministry of Education and Culture published in late last year, recommendations for academic cooperation with China. And I think it's important to understand that this is not any kind of guideline paper even. It is really a recommendation. It is a recommendation to pay attention some issues that may be complicated, but also at the same time keeping in mind that there is a lot that we can and should be cooperating with. So the goal is to have better and more aware cooperation with China, because Finnish higher education institutions still are quite interested in this cooperation. To the political atmosphere, the superpower competition, they have not been quite sure what can be done. And that's why we wanted to put together a document that maybe helps to guide some of these issues. So there are some key concepts, maybe ethical issues that are very important in the European context, in the Finnish context, that are maybe a little bit differently understood in China. And that is good to understand and pay attention to. There are issues related to security, especially in high technologies, in the critical technologies fields, dual use of technologies. It is a field that we have to understand a little bit better. And then there are issues related to competitiveness. Export control is a very complicated matter, and it of course works from both sides, but we have to understand what are the export control matters vis-a-vis China, vis-a-vis Europe, United States, whoever we work with. So it seems that the world of academic cooperation is becoming more and more complicated. And with this document, the ministry wants to give some guidance and recommendations to the institutions. Next slide, please. The initiative for this document, we are often asked, why do we need recommendations for academic cooperation? It really came from the higher education institutions themselves, because they found that there were a lot of questions and concerns and misunderstandings about what can and should be done with China. And the process has been going on pretty much from 2019 until today. I think there was a question really that do we dare to cooperate with China on anything? And that's why it was so important to the Ministry of Education to really make sure that yes, we can and we should, but we should be aware of certain issues. And the Finnish higher education institutions are responsible of certain very legally binding issues like the export control matters, again, which are quite complicated. So Finland also published a governmental action plan on China earlier last year. And this was a cross-ministerial document that really touched upon all ministries. They're working with China in cooperation. And the academic recommendations were an additional paper really to go a little bit deeper in what is happening in the education and science field. But it is a short public document, and it is no guidelines, it is recommendations, and it is in the spirit of code of conduct. Next slide, please. So that means that the institutions of themselves really have the responsibility. And the starting point is to have a better and more aware cooperation with Chinese higher education and research institutions. I think this kind of document easily brings into mind negative or critical connotations. And of course, it talks about serious issues. But at the same time, from the very beginning, the goal was a short and clear document to assist the higher education institutions in making secure and ethical decisions. So many of the issues, of course, are relevant to all international cooperation. I think in today's world, we know that everybody has to be extra aware on their cooperation topics. And why China has a specific paper, it is because China poses some specific challenges, different political system, its political ambitions, and also the superpower competition between United States and China. But the bottom line is really understanding China better. I have had several discussions with Chinese officials about this paper, and I think there has been an understanding. One official said very nicely that, yes, I understand that you need to understand us better. And I think we are in a position to cooperate better when we understand each other better. If we are just concerned and just focus on challenges that we don't really understand, I think we are in much worse place to build a comfortable and sustainable cooperation. So the focus is really on understanding China. China is a country and institutions that we want to cooperate with for a long time. And China is a major player also, of course, in the world economic field and beyond. So last but not least, some of the types of cooperation forms, last slide please, that we are doing, have been doing with China, between Finland and China over the years, especially that I have been here. Of course, most of the international cooperation starts with student and staff exchange. Unfortunately, again, that has been limited, but due to COVID. But at the same time, I think I'm very happy to report that a lot of remote cooperation forms have taken place, and I have heard that both sides are quite pleased. Joint programs are quite popular model of cooperation now. I think we have about 10 between the higher education institutions, and there are more to come. And that is now a model that the Finnish institutions also understand. It is complicated, of course, to start with a foreign country, a joint program, but after a while, when there is enough experience, the sides have seen that it's doable and quite successful experiences as well. Then there are different kinds of training modules, especially teacher education has been quite popular. Of course, research is an important form of cooperation in very many different fields. A lot of the research, especially in engineering and science, but we know that we have excellent cooperation also in design, fashion. We have climate issues, well, that's in the field of science, but and also education and other topics. And now Finland, couple of years ago, Finnish Ministry of Education provided strategic funding for higher education institutions to work together to increase and intensify their cooperation with Chinese institutions. And we have 3 large networks, Finland-China global networks, where a good number of Finnish institutions is joining Chinese partners in the topics of teaching and learning, which is part of what we are doing right now. And then we have one on food and health sciences. And then we also have a network for universities of applied sciences. This was also in connection, of course, to the Arene and Naya cooperation, but it's also a little bit different approach. At the same time, the Finnish institutions are very interested in student recruitment from China. Chinese students have excellent reputation in Finland, and we would like to see many more. And we have some education exports on different fields. Training maybe one, but more to come. But I think these are great examples of what can be done and has been done and should be done in the future. And I'm sure we can also find new ways. I think I'm finished in just about 15 minutes. So thank you. Kiitos. Ciese.
Thank you, and kiitos, Mariana. Mariana's presentation highlights one very important issue in China, Finland, or even in the larger context of the EU-China higher education cooperation. I think for those who have been long time collaborating with China from Finland, or those who are just starting the collaboration, it's very important, to be aware of the changes. The changes is not only about the practice, but also about the environment, environmental conditions, pandemic, as well as geopolitics. So this is very important. I like the figure drawn by Mariana, the page 3 of her presentation. The figure nicely, demonstrate the changes. There was, very nice period, golden age of China, Finland collaboration. So many actors, involved in the collaboration for new discoveries. But since the 1918 or 2000, since the 2018, so there are some changes. And now, actually, the changes is not only causing challenges, but Mariana, also expecting some new models of the collaboration. Probably, these changes may trigger us, innovative thinking to think in new ways of collaborating between the two countries, and probably find more sustainable ways of collaboration. So very nice description of the changes. But now we welcome our commentator, Dr. Wei Liu from Canada. So Dr. Wei Liu, or David Liu, is a practitioner and researcher in higher education internationalization at the University Alberta, International, Canada. He obtained his PhD degree in education from Beijing Normal University in 2011, and he was the 2011-2012 Horowitz postdoctoral fellow at the Center for Research for Teacher Education and Development, University of Alberta. In the past 10 years, he has been leading the Global Academic Leadership Development Program at the University of Alberta, a professional development program for Chinese university administrative leaders. Besides the practical work, he has also widely published, research papers in journals in higher education and international education. So David or Dr. Liu, floor is yours. So you have around 10 minutes time to give your comments to both speakers, and also share your own observations on the international collaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I hope everybody can hear me okay.
Yes.
Okay, I got a wrong time, so I actually came to the meeting much later. All right. So I'm going to share some of my observations from the Canadian or North American perspective. And the title is Higher Education Exchange as Knowledge Diplomacy. First, I want to quote a European scholar's perspective on the different goals of higher education exchange or higher education internationalization. The first one is a liberal and educational goal. It's at the personal level, and it is used to prepare students with the ability to participate fully in the global world. And the second one is more at the national level. Internationalization of education has a more instrumental competitive goal, which is taking international education as a means to maximize profit, ensure economic growth, and sustain development. This is more at the national level. And the third goal is more at the global level, and it's used to achieve an idealistic transformative goal, which is using international education as a force for social transformations at the global level. So I like this perspective because it lays out the goal of international education from 3 different levels, achieving 3 different goals. And but today the reality is internationalization has been increasingly motivated by profits rather than either government policy or goodwill, particularly in the North American and British context. The traditional values such as exchange and cooperation, peace and mutual understanding, human capital development and solidarity have been pushed to the side for the purpose of competition, revenue, and reputation branding. So I'm citing the work of David, which is a very established scholar in this field from Boston College. And there's also a political focus these days, which means that internationalization is also increasingly used as a way to enhance a country's political influence through soft power. And soft power as a concept developed in the late 1980s to refer to one country's ability to influence the behavior of other countries. So there has been more of an economic and political focus. And here I'm citing an expert on international education from a Canadian scholar called Jing Meiying. And she said that the field of international education needs to transition from an ideological focus on soft power to a global focus on knowledge diplomacy. Knowledge diplomacy is a new concept, a new approach to understanding the role of international higher education in strengthening relations among countries and addressing common global challenges. So I want to use a couple of programs that I have been running in the past few years in Canada to show the role of higher education exchanges between China and Canada in promoting knowledge diplomacy at the people-to-people level, despite some of the ideological differences and occasional political challenges between the 2 countries. First is the Global Academic Leadership Development Program. This program has been running since 2011. It's a professional development program for Chinese university administrators. So over the past 10 years, we had about over actually 800 participants from about 200 universities. They came to the University of Alberta for 3 months for each cohort. I've been running this program since 2011. And these are, we have recorded the scholars, the participants' observations of Canada while they were here. I want to share 2 quotes. It's from a paper I wrote and published in 2019. So, for example, I'm going to read the 2 observations. One participant shared his observation of the humanistic and caring culture in Canada beyond the university campus. The needing buses to provide accessibility of public facilities to the disabled, people talking more quietly in public, holding doors for people coming from behind, saying hi to strangers, standing to the right on the escalators, saying thanks to bus drivers, and saying sorry all the time. Now, similarly, another person observed, when I first came to Canada, I felt guilty when drivers stopped to let me cross the road. I will run to save the driver's time. If cars do this in China, they won't go anywhere for a whole day, as there are so many people. And Canadians are so friendly. They always smile and say hi. Again, in China, you won't be able to do that. There are just too many people on the street. So these are very small observations beyond the program, but they live in the city. They observe on the street, they observe on the public transit. And these are very, very small observations, but reflects people's appreciation, the visitors' appreciation of the local culture and the local people. I want to share another program called Canada Learning Initiative in China. It's a coalition of 12 top Canadian research-intensive universities with the goal of increasing Canadian students' participation in studying China. So this program sends Canadian students to study in Chinese universities. So it started from 2016, and we have sent to about 850 students from Canada to pursue study abroad opportunities in China in different Chinese universities. I want to share Canadian students' observations in China. I also use 2 quotes. I'll try to be quick. The first student said, "I never felt uncomfortable going out by myself, even when I left the big cities. I went to explore China's rural areas. I went to Shanghai." This student studied in Beijing, actually. I went camping on the Great Wall. I went hiking. As a young woman from a Western country, I never dreaded traveling on my own. I never felt insecure or came across issues I couldn't deal with. I didn't lose my calm, even when I missed my train back to Beijing. With the help of TikTok and a translation app, I purchased a ticket for the next train. There's another student. I noticed the negative images of China perpetuated by Western media, but I encountered people with the same dreams and aspirations as anyone else. In China, I met normal people trying to earn a degree, hold on a job, and raise a family. So again, these are very small observations of Canadian students in China about Chinese people, normal Chinese people in their daily lives. So it's beyond the university campus. It's beyond the program, the academic program they were studying. So here, these very small observations and experiences show students and scholars increased awareness, the demographic, economic, and the cultural context of both countries. The experiences help promote people-to-people understanding and an enlightened nationalism, not narrow nationalism. They begin to see how their own country aligns with other countries in the global community. And these experiences help reduce xenophobia, fear, and ethnic distance. It really increased their liking of each other's people. The experiences give students and scholars deep appreciation of each other's people with a focus on similarities and common destiny instead of differences and national competition. So from my perspective, knowledge diplomacy should be really pursued more in the future as a goal in higher education exchanges beyond the current economic and political focus pursued by, say, Australia, North America, and British universities to a large extent. So these small observations really give me hope for the future, for the peaceful development of mankind down the road. These very, very small observations. But the good news, it seems to me that both countries in Canada and in China, both governments actually, they have been very, very committed to knowledge diplomacy, to people-to-people exchanges. Even when we had tensions, some political tension between the two countries, both governments were very much committed to supporting the mobility of people between the two countries in the sector of higher education. So both governments seem to believe in knowledge diplomacy between the two peoples. So that's my observation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, David. Very insightful comments and observations. So it's very nice you present some conceptual framework based on the citations of your work, and also established scholars in the field of internationalization of higher education. So I think that's also a trigger of thinking. So after hearing both presenters about the practices and the challenges in the Finland-China higher education collaboration, now I think it's important to think how we understand the nature of international cooperation. I think you offered a very useful perspective, like the knowledge democracy. Probably, this requires us, to think what is higher education cooperation for. So I think this is a really important question you have raised. I think it's really worth, a hard debate, and also friendly discussions at this moment. I also invite audience to raise your questions in the chat box. But before I see any questions appearing in the chat box, I can ask some questions to the panelists. First, I have a question to Meiying. So are you ready? Okay, yeah, so you can hear me now. Good.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, so I think you have demonstrated very good examples, illustrating the promising future of China-Finland higher education collaboration. But also you have seen the presentation by Mariana that not only in Finland, I think in general in Europe, in the Union, and in many other European member states, so they are developing new recommendations, or guidelines regarding China cooperation, not limited in higher education, but in general. Basically EU is changing their strategies in collaborating with China. So given such context, so my question is, how do you see that the Chinese government and the Chinese higher education institutions, how are they aware of the changes on the European side, or Finland in particular, because you are in a very crucial position, National Academy of Education Administration, so you have good access to the government policymakers, and also you have lots of students who are the university leaders. So probably you are the best person to answer the question, how are they aware of the changes in Finland or in Europe in general? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. I thank David Liu, Liu 老师, and Mariana for their presentation. It's very enlightening. And actually, for myself, for the question, I don't consider myself as some people very close to the policymaker, decision maker, policymaker. We as the international office staff, I mainly work on the international cooperation, and we set our vision or view for international level. I mean, we work more with the international counterparts. So from in answer your question, we have acknowledged that from Mariana's presentation, as well as from my recent research on documents or policies of Finnish policy in terms of cooperation with China. I noticed the recommendation for higher education cooperation with China, and as for the European ones, in general, they always consider China as systematic rival and economic competitor, but in the other level, we are still strong partners. So set this as the foundation for the cooperation. I don't think there are many changes, but one thing I would like to point out that from Mariana's presentation, as well for the Finnish government's recommendation to higher education cooperation with China, there's one thing I think it's just echoed my suggestions or my my recommendations for the future cooperation between Finland and China. There's one point that view that they said that China has gradually or increasingly emphasized the ideological education in universities or whatever. But in my point of view, that's a kind of misinformation. As Chinese higher education system with distinct Chinese characteristic, we didn't change anything in the past years. The only thing we do, we just emphasize the role, the higher education development should follow the natural law of education as a scientific topic itself. So the university don't emphasize ideological education at all, but they want to make us distinguished from they want to develop a higher education with distinguished Chinese characteristic. That means in the past decade, Chinese higher education is a follower for the international higher education. And now they want to get visible in higher education system in the international perspective. They want to be Chinese university to make contribution to the higher education, modern higher education governance. They want to be a key player or contributor for the modern governance system in higher education. That's the first point I would like to make. Second, from my interview with Chinese university leaders, as well as from the discussions with our European partners, we noticed that universities' mission didn't change, no matter the policies in government level, how they change their policies. But for the university leaders, they think the university should be a strong power, or for the peace and for understanding, for the mutual understanding. They should play a key role in transforming true evidence, true information based on evidence. So I think for the Chinese partners, they still feel it's a great opportunity for us to work with our European partners or Finnish partners, especially for University of Applied Science in western part of China. As I stated, the western part of China, the University of Applied Sciences, we refer to new colleges those who they transformed from higher education, vocational higher education institutions to university in early 2009 or 2010. They are transforming from higher education institution to universities of applied sciences. They will have a very strong role in fostering, educating skilled and professional personnel. So they have the zest to work with their international partners. They don't consider the national policy or the recommendation will affect their genuine intention to work together with their international partners. I think there still has hope to. The only thing we needed to do is bridge the communication, the dialogue, and to eliminate the misunderstanding between two systems or two countries. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your.
Too long.
Yeah, comprehensive, not too long. Thank you. Yeah, so I think given the time limit, I want to move immediately to Mariana. So I have a question. So since your presentation very much about the recent Ministry of Education's recommendations for collaborating with Chinese higher educations. Also, you mentioned that there are seemingly some contesting logics in the recommendations. For example, on the one hand, China is a growing power in science technology, so Finnish universities still need to continue work with China. But on the other hand, there are some warnings, strict terms are imposed somehow to ensure that the collaboration won't jeopardize ethical issues and academic freedom, and also the IPR. So whether you have already observed, some challenges or even puzzles faced by the practitioners, meaning those, for example, academics and also the universities, when they are continuing their collaboration with China or renewing their old collaborating contract, whether these universities face some difficulties when there are the recommendations. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. It's a good one. Well, first of all, I would like to thank Meiying for the response from the NAE perspective. I think that was very thorough and insightful also. And I think exactly in a way that it's the kind of dialogue that we should have so that we understand one another better. So I really think that is a key, and we should be able to talk about the difficult issues as well if we want to be good partners. And this is actually what I always say to the higher education institutions in Finland, because sometimes they call me with these questions, but you just ask me. So are there concerns about the cooperation, because there is so much writing now about China? Can we do this, and so forth? And I usually say that talk with your partners. They want to cooperate with you. So in most cases, your cooperation has nothing to do with politics. It has nothing to do with great power politics. But we have to understand the context a little bit better, so you are able to make the kinds of decisions that you have to make. But at the same time, if you have a partner, talk with them, open the dialogue and be frank about it, because as scientists, as educators, you usually want the same thing. You want to do the academic cooperation. You don't want to worry about the political issues or ideological differences. You want to focus on your science or your educational cooperation. So I think these are important remarks, and really the reason why the recommendations paper was done. It may seem controversial, but it was really to try to help some of the puzzles. I think some higher education institutions say that, okay, so we can now do anything if we take into account the security issues like dual use. That only, of course, concerns a very limited type of research cooperation. If we only take into consideration export control, again, it doesn't concern most of the kind of collaboration we do. So by eliminating those issues that we have to take into account, I think we understand that we can do a lot. But also, as it was elaborated in Meiying's presentation, China wants to be a player in the education world. And it should be, because it has such good higher education institutions. And this is, of course, somewhat maybe concerning for the rest of us, because we are used to operating in the certain kind of academic world. And China now is a true challenger. And we see other countries who may be following the same lead. So we are in a potential changing point. I certainly hope we find through science and academic diplomacy that David was then also reflecting on, that we can cooperate together despite the differences. And I think David's presentation, I also want to thank you for that. I think it's really what's best about the international cooperation and the students' experiences. They are the little things, the little understandings that people are similar, you manage in a different culture, because people typically want to help you, and they are helpful, and you are resourceful. here and more Chinese students back to Finland for these moments, because this is really what makes the understanding easier and cooperation easier when we understand one another. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana. You are not only answer my question, but you nicely respond to Meiying's talk and also David's observation. So this is actually what we're supposed to have, the dialogues between you. But since we are over time, now I just ask the last question to David. Since you are from Canada, so we take also the opportunity to ask you kindly, brief the recent changes concerning the China's collaboration with North America in higher education. So in such context, also I would like to hear whether you find Finland has some special characteristics, that make Finland somehow different to other Western countries. Thank you. You are muted.
Yeah, okay, I'm good now. From a North American perspective, I think all the concern, I think the duality in the Finnish government's perspective are putting, seeing China as a collaborator and the same as a challenger, as a competitor. The duality will put Finnish universities in a pretty difficult position. I can see that happening from North America as well. The whole discourse was started from the Trump administration in the US. And he started a program in particular to investigate potential technological theft or intellectual property issues among the Chinese American professors working in the US. They started a program to investigate a lot of the professors' research activities. But it turned out they found absolutely nothing. And then I'm not sure if you've ever heard that recently in the past year that the Biden administration abolished, finished the program. They are no longer doing any further investigations of any potential technological theft committed by Chinese American professors. And when the US was doing that, the whole Western world sort of followed. So I understand the duality in the policy from the Finnish government. Similar is true for Canada. At the height of the investigation, we were even, the Canadian government and the Canadian universities, major research intensive universities like the University of Alberta I work at, we were even given sort of warnings by US agencies to be careful about our exchanges with Chinese universities. But again, nothing was found through the US investigations. But also I want to repeat a point. Even during such tensions, political tensions, the mobility of people between the two countries continued, and both governments were very much committed to supporting university people-to-people exchanges. Chinese students continued to come to study in Canadian universities, and Canadian students expressed a similarly strong interest in studying China. Of course, the pandemic put a lot of restraint, a lot of limitations on international mobility. But I believe from the bigger scheme of things, the pandemic control in China is temporary from the long range of views. It's been 2 years, and I understand the policy in China because the bigger population and limited healthcare to a lot of remote areas, and it's necessary to be more careful about the control. But again, this is temporary, very much temporary. Back to the question about the Finnish advantage. I'll be very quick. part of my research is teacher education. I think Finnish system and the Chinese system have a lot to offer to the whole world, not to each other, actually. The best practices in teacher education. I think the Finnish system is the best of the Western system in teacher education. All the Western countries, including Canada, including the US, are trying to look into the best practice in teacher education. For example, how teachers are developed, how teachers' professional development happens, teacher autonomy, and teachers' payment, all those issues. And actually for China offers to the world the best example, the best practice from an Oriental and Asian perspective, the best practice. So I think Finland and China have the best to offer in the field of teacher education. And also there need to be mutual learning between the two systems. Again, when the West, they think about the best practice, they look into Finland. When the East think about the best practice, they look into China. Again, I think if the Finnish system and the Chinese system should join hands in educating the world in the best teacher education practices. I think this is the potential area. This is the potential area that we should really work on together in teacher education. I hope that will make sense. I will encourage experts in the Chinese teacher education field have a delegate, more of those normal universities presidents. They should go study in Finland. They should learn about the Finnish. That's the best in the West. The best in the West. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your reflections on the challenges and the realities from North American perspective. I'm also very glad to hear you put China and Finland in such significant position. So now I think I need to thank all the presenters and commentators, Meiying, Mariana and David, for your great contribution and very insightful discussions. Also, I thank you all the participants for staying with us, even though, we have about 10 minutes longer than we're supposed to be, but you are still here, and hope everybody enjoy the session. And let's continue the discussion. And most importantly, let's continue the higher education cooperation. That is very important, which has been highlighted by all the panelists. Regardless of the challenges, we should enhance our mutual understanding. We should continue to collaborate and also to develop a knowledge democracy. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for everyone, and see you next time. Bye-bye.